Hi, I'm Tony Armendariz, signature member of the American Artist Professional League. Today, I'm going to be painting for you in watercolor, demonstrating my pure, transparent watercolor technique. Throughout my painting, I will talk a little bit more about the materials I'm using, a little bit even more about the subject matter, composition, things like that. At the end of this video, I will list out some of the names, a little bit more detail about some of the materials I'm using, the brushes, the pigments, the paper, and such. So, what I want to do for today is a little mix of subject matter here. This is basically a man on a horse cart. This picture basically features some figurative, animal, little still life, a little bit of landscape in the background. So I'm going to approach this with what looks like a lot of detail, but I'm kind of staying away from that. I'm going to be blocking in large shapes. I'll talk about that some more, how I handle some of the detail here. And I also will mention later on about how a painting like this could be used as sort of an intermediate painting, something like almost a preparatory sketch, what I might do before painting a much larger or finished painting with much more detail. What I have here is a value sketch that I worked up. One of the pictures I took for my reference, I actually took several pictures and combined a few things in Photoshop to give myself this square composition, which I don't do too often. But the way it fits the action of the composition, the way this cart sort of leans down backwards, giving it a little added tension, I sort of like. And he fills out the square composition really nice, I think. So I think that's what I'm going to work with. And so let's get started and talk to you some more during the painting. Okay, so we're ready to paint here. Let's talk a little bit about the setup, about the materials, the drawings that I have, reference material and such. Got the palette ready to go here, full of paint. Pretty much a wide, open wide palette that I'm going to use here. Obviously not every color, but pretty much, I want to wet down what I have, reconstitute some dry colors, put out a lot of fresh paint here. Off camera here, I have my wet sponge and my brush holders. And right up here, I have some clear water and some water for, well, that'll get dirty. So, I have brushes, a 1.5 inch flat brush, and I have 3 different size round brushes. I'm not going to use a small detailed round brush as the points on these are pretty good, so I think I'm going to get all the detail I need out of these guys. I'm going to set those over here to my right. Photo reference, basically we have the horse cart here. This gentleman was photographed down in Cuba, in western Cuba, the Pinar del Rio province, which basically is where all the tobacco is grown for the cigars. And what I like about this is basically he's not worried that his cart is basically almost tilting off the road here into a ditch. Of course, he's holding, in this picture, he's holding a can of beer. I think I'm going to be leaving that out. But his horse has actually come to a stop here, and as I was driving by, I took his picture. And one other thing that I'm going to do in here, as we're talking about some of the changes I'm making in this photo, is there's a lot of electrical wires and some electrical towers in the background here. I'm going to leave those out. The palm trees and some of the other vegetation here gives me a real nice sense of place. I want it to be kind of timeless in that way. And so I'm going to kind of leave those out. Also, as I show here in my drawing that I worked up, a little sketch, this is going to be done a lot in silhouette. In other words, there's going to be some background here in the far background, but immediately surrounding the horse cart there's going to be some shadow indicating some of the grass, and that's kind of it. It's a pretty warm sunny day, not too many clouds. I don't need a lot of filler in here. I just love the silhouette of the horse, the cart, the man, and I think that's going to work out pretty well. So I have my sketch over here to my left for reference. Photo references right up here, off camera a little bit. And basically I have my drawing here put together, and it's done lightly. I use an F pencil, so just dark enough where I do a few washes and then I can still see the pencil, and if I cover it up, I'll be in good shape. If anything's left over, I can erase it or just leave it. I'm not too worried about that. I'm using a square composition here, which is you know, it's a little different because sometimes, you know, I automatically think I should go vertical or horizontal. But this worked out in a pretty nice square composition. Because I figured there was information on both left and right that I didn't need. And the bottom, well, the cart is going right into the one corner here. The sky is going to be pretty loose and light for relief from all the detail happening here. And so that worked itself out well, I think, in this square composition. So I'm going to get going. I am on painting on 300-pound Arches paper, cold press. And with that in mind, let's get going here. I'm going to start off with a little wet on wet for the background. Up here. The rest of this, a lot of this is going to be wet onto dry. I have a lot of details drawn in here. I might not necessarily paint all of them. They're just for reference only. And I'm going to do this this would serve as sort of a nice preparatory painting for a larger finished painting if I wanted to do one. So I'm going to paint this fairly quick. A little quicker than I normally would. But I'm going to be utilizing layers. I wouldn't say a lot of water, really. Most water is probably being used right now for the background. I want to carefully paint around his face, even though that's going to be dark and overlap. His shirt, which I might keep light, on the horse's head and back. I'm not going to use a lot of color in the sky in the background. I'm just going to mix up some cerulean blue here. Paint right through the trees. I'm going to be painting over those. There we are, not too strong. Back here might get a little darker, I realize, to bring his hat, head, and shoulders forward a little bit more. There we are. You go ahead and go right to a larger round brush. And I'm mixing up let's see, I want to mix a sap green, but I'm going to neutralize it a little bit. I don't want it to be too strong. I'm going to throw in a little Payne's gray. Mixing a touch of cerulean there. Okay. Working while it's still wet, I'm going to have a lot of soft edges back there. In front of the horse. Get close to him, I could darken my value just a little bit. As it dries a little bit more, I'll paint in a few more details on the trees back here. Not much. But I do want to make sure I got the values behind him where I want it. I know it's going to lighten up considerably on me, but I can go over it again, that's fine. Okay. I'm just using a little green pale here, just sort of as a different green, suggesting some trees and vegetation in the front of the palm trees back here. Also, I'll take a little of my dioxazine purple and suggest even, you could say, trees or mountains further in the background here. Again, I might revisit that once it dries off a little bit. This is going to lighten up, and I'll probably go over it with another value and a few more details as it dries. So, while that's doing its thing, no need to take a hairdryer to it as it's drying perfectly on its own. It's isolated. I'll go ahead, another brush. I'm going to start working with a little burnt sienna. I'm going to paint the horse in now. Working with a couple different oranges and earth tones. Earth tones such as, what do we got here? Burnt umber, quinacridone gold. They're all fairly close, some a little more intense than others. So, again, going straight wet onto dry. These are larger shapes that I can block in here before going on to some of the details. So, here we go. Back here's the tail. It'll get considerably darker. Just watch a few of the details here. I'm going to go up by the head. Of course, it's usually, as with a lot of painting like this, especially watercolor, once we start laying in some of the darks and some of the details, then everything comes into focus. It starts to look like what we think we're painting. A little light up here, a little yellow ochre. There we are. Let's just drop in a few more stronger saturated color here. It's good to think of all this detail as a collection of large and small shapes. You know, especially if you're painting something that you're not, a subject matter you're not as familiar with, you want to break this down as much as possible. I mean, in the drawing, a lot of times I'll do a drawing to do just that, where I can spend a little more time on details. Whether or not I paint all those details, well, that's, you know, that comes later. Those decisions I might, you know, decide, oh, I like a little more abstract quality to this, but I'll do a sketch, like with a portrait, I'll do a sketch ahead of time. Because that helps with details, helps with values, helps with composition. All kinds of issues might arise that are great for doing those sketches ahead of time. simple graphite sketches. Generally not as concerned about getting the colors right. I'm not going for photorealism per se, but if the values are in the right spot, then chances are I'll be much more successful. I've got a lot of shadow in here too. A lot of little drop shadows, which I gotta look at. So, okay. Let's see here. Go around some of these other details. And I try to be careful sometimes. What I'll do is I'll take a piece of tracing paper as to not smudge my drawing. So this will help. Fold it back up. Go. Make sure this is, got to be careful that this is dry enough around here that I can paint. I'll come back to it later. It'll dry soon enough. I prefer not to use the hairdryer unless absolutely have to. The hairdryer does impede some of the qualities of the water carrying the pigment, and I like it to dry in its natural state. I think it looks better that way. So, okay. Let's go down to his legs. Putting out these nice fresh colors like this gives you the strong saturated pigments that you want. Because otherwise, if you're just working with reconstituted pigment, you're spending more time breaking it up, and you're not going to get as much paint out onto the paper. So, now while we're doing the horse's legs, I'm going to add some more Payne's Gray. The legs in the back are much darker. These guys are not part of the cart. He was standing, which was interesting. Not moving when I took his picture. I was moving. Helped me focus a little better. So, let's see here. Okay. Watch out. Check out my shadows here. Some of the anatomy. A little negative painting with some of the grass here. All right. Of the rear leg, pretty much all just solely in shadow. Working on the 140-pound paper doesn't absorb as much pigment as, say, the 300-pound paper, what I normally work on. So a lot of times when you're working on these thinner papers, it's a lot easier to get nice saturated colors. I'll come back down to this grass later and finish that off separately with all the negative painting in there. Okay. While I have out my Payne's Gray, let's go ahead. How are we doing up here? Still pretty wet, pretty damp. So, you know what? While we're down here, I like to jump around a lot. I don't like to try and finish one area and then move on to another, because you're judging this one area against white. I need to know how light, how dark, how saturated color I must use when everything's comparing to everything else. Like this background. I don't know if I want to go that much darker back here. Once I have him painted in, these guys painted in, it might be okay. I know that I do want a little more definition back there. I just don't know how much. So I might leave it, let it dry completely, and then after I have my main characters painted in, I'll revisit the background for finishing touches. So let's dry the brush off. You know what, we're going to do the axles. The axle is just kind of interesting down here. I'm liking yellow ochre and you know what, it's kind of strong. Got some cadmium orange in there, all rusted out. Just watch my hand. Okay. A lot of yellow and orange in the shadows here, which I think make for a much more interesting shadow. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that all in. Some of my yellow, some of my orange. And then I can darken it up. I can still see the drawing, but then I can darken it up. There's still enough information there for me to help guide me. Look at this, yellow comes all the way out onto the wheel here, the tire. There we go. A little negative painting down here. I could jump back over here. Rusted out old wheel. This looks great, these colors. Sunbake. Let's get a little softer edge going on some of that. What I'll do is I'll paint over with a clear brush, just a little bit of water, soften up the edges there. A lot of orange here. A lot of orange. Rusted out bolts. An interesting bluish color going on back here too. The tire, well, we can easily say Payne's gray, but we want to watch out how dark we make this. Not too many hard edges on the tire itself. I guess this tire hasn't seen a change in a long time. Now we can get a lot. Well, let's hold on here. I like this little reflection of orange down here. When you move your colors around like this, it just gives it so much more movement, eye movement. As long as your drawing's in good shape, you can do stuff like this, and you're still within realism, but you're adding a little extra abstract quality to it for the sake of eye movement, for the sake of, you know, we're not being married to the photo. It's not about copying a photo. It's about making this your own. Okay, I'm going to kind of scumble or drag the brush over the tooth of the paper here for a little added texture of the tire. See what's going on down here? We like that. We like that play of water mixing and breaking up some of the edges. I'm going to let that sit a little bit. I'll come back to it and fill in some more details and definitely some more darks down here. Let's jump over to the other tire. Further in the background, a little darker back here. Pretty dark behind the grass. Again, some negative painting here. Now I can go back. Let's see here, we got a shadow. It's dark, but it's still a transparent wash, so some of the orange is going to show through. It's a cylinder, so it's going to be a little darker here. Going in some of the darkest spots here with the shadow. Okay. Dark's underneath the cab of the cart. We can darken up here behind the grass. The blades. Now I want some of this to dry, and again I'll go over it with another value once it has. That's fine for now. I'm going to go ahead and block in the cart. Use a slightly bigger round brush. I like the brilliant green because it's going to pop off from back here, so I'm going to stay with that. I'm probably going to use a little phthalo on this, really punch it up. But maybe a little turquoise in there. There's going to be. I'm going to start though with on the left side where the sun's hitting that, some yellow ochre, a little pale green, and we're going to dry brush some of this in. Just a little touch of the phthalo. And props going on. A little stronger top. Okay. Middle section. Let's hit the back real hard. In this photo, there's some stickers here. I'm leaving that off. I don't know if this was signage or what that was, but there's certainly enough here that's really not needed. I don't want the eye to go directly towards that. Suggest wood planks here. Okay, zoom in on this for a second. You can see, and all the light is sort of, get a little reflection there. There we go. Put this back down. There we are. Just slightly smaller brush. There's some other details I like on here. This thing's pretty rusted out. Just looking at different spots where to hit some color. Strengthen this up down here a little more. This is much stronger here. Let's soften that up a little bit there, soften the edge. There we go. We've got a lot of rusted out stuff going on here. You like rust, there's a lot going on here for rust. It's the shadows that are going to help define this a lot more. So let's just block in the shapes again. Then we'll come back. Okay. Over here. Start to define the card a little bit more. Okay. This pull back here is interesting. It's green and purple. Okay, let's just take a look at the basics that we've blocked in here. Most of the silhouette, I still have the figure, the mane, and basically a lot of the bridle and a lot of the other details here as the horse is really, it's almost like it's so connected to this, it's like a part of it. These tires are great, they're kind of almost, they almost look like they're going off in opposite directions. So now I'm basically ready to paint in the back here. So we'll get to that. What I'm doing here, for the sake of time, I've gone into this a little further. I'm darkening the values behind our guy here on the cart. This thing's pretty abstract with these trees, but you know, there are some distinct shapes that I want this to be somewhat recognizable. I'm just not painting this thing branch for branch, leaf for leaf back here. So there's a lot of color and value going on back here. Mixture of soft and wet edges, mostly wet. Okay. I could drop in, lighten it up in a few areas here, just to show that it's not all the same. Now again, this is sort of acting as my horizon back here. I'm not really going to be doing anything down here, so okay. As with a lot of these experiments that I record, what you see on the camera looks considerably darker than it does in real life. Hopefully at the end of this I could take a nice color correct picture and post it, and you can see exactly what it looks like. Well, but that's what the lights do. You know, they show this reflection. You know, look how much reflection is here with the water, and a lot of the white is reflected too from the paper and some of the lights that I have on here in the studio. So let's build up this cart green down here. I'd like this to be strong. Mixture of sap green and phthalo. There we go. There's going to be a lot of shadow and detail covering some of this, so we want the back of this to be pretty strong. Nice, strong, saturated color. There we go. Okay, bar down the middle. And over on the side here. Crop shadow. I'll try to even add a little bit of purple too. High contrast. Very strong, nice. Detail up here. Little details like that add to the silhouette real nice. Okay. Just strengthen some of this up here. There we go. Okay. Pretty good shape down here. Again, what I'll do is, so I'm not making this a long video, with a lot of the larger shapes blocked in, I'll be jumping ahead to some of the detail in a minute here. I want to get some of the tail here. I'm going to block that in. Pretty dark. Go. More wet onto dry. Gotta watch out some little details here. Tricky. Okay. Okay. You see little things like this. Okay. I'm going to block his shirt in. Give him sort of a pinkish shirt, which I think would be kind of nice. I'm not going to put the stripes on his shirt. I think they're a little bit much for what else is going on here. So what I'm going to do is drop in just a little value to help give it some shape. Because then I also have his jeans to deal with. Color. Shadow under his arm there. Let that dry. I'm going to jump back over and darken some of the wheel here. Get into some of the, go ahead and get some dark green going here into my grass. Some of this shape around this. Okay, just filling in some of the shape a little better. The hub, the internal part here. Now I can put another wash back over this down here. It's getting pretty dark. And I'll even darken up some of the axle a little bit. Pretty strong down there. Okay. Let's move on to some details. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and start to drop in some of the details that surround the head of the horse, along the back, and some of the other equipment that connects him to the cart. These are some of the details. There is his mane, of course, which will match his tail. And little time consuming. I'm going to go ahead and drop in some of these details, and we'll jump ahead a little bit here, and I'll come down into the rest of the cart also before I go ahead and block in our man here. Well, I've gone ahead and filled in a few more details around the horse. Let me go ahead and drop in some of the color on our rider here, using a little bit of quinacridone rust and a little cadmium orange here. Basically, all I have to do here is his left arm, drop in a color, and same with his face, which I will then make a little more recognizable once I put in some shadows. Not a lot of detail on his face here. Okay. I'll go ahead and grab some blue, mostly cerulean, for his pants. Pretty light near the top. I'll drop in a little shadow on that also. There we go. Shadow. Cast shadow. And I'll be dropping in a little bit more color onto his shirt as soon as some more of this dries. Well, here he is. Horse cart, the horse cart man and the horse, with all his detail that I added on. You know, I sped that up and added a little bit. Again, when you look at this real close, actually not as much detail as you would think, but it all worked out pretty well. Blocking in the green cart is real nice. His hat, his features, the tire, the shape, and the background all came together pretty well. Leaving the background white, giving it I don't know, more of an intense sunlight feel, I think worked out just well. This whole painting pretty much acts as a silhouette with a light background, a little bit of a light background. So 15 by 15 inches, nice square composition, I think worked out pretty well. I'm pretty happy with it. The value sketch helped out a lot, and thank you for watching, and hang on and I'll be showing you some of the materials I used a little bit more.